October 15th, 1987. The Belmont Country Club had a simple rule: whites only after midnight. Tank Washington stood at the door, 6 feet 4 inches and 280 pounds of muscle, watching the most dangerous man in Vegas walk through those brass doors. Mike Tyson wasn't supposed to be there. Bobby the Mountain Kowalski, the club's 300-pound enforcer, cracked his knuckles. Tank had seen Bobby break ribs for less. The whole room went silent, 30 witnesses, security cameras rolling, and Tank knew that whatever happened next would either make history or bury it. Bobby grabbed Tyson's shoulder. What happened in that single second changed everything Tank thought he knew about power, about justice, and about the night that ended his own boxing career. For 35 years, Tank kept that secret, until last Tuesday, when the video surfaced. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you: the hook. Tank's hands shook as he stared at his phone screen in the dim light of his Henderson apartment. The YouTube video had 2.3 million views in 18 hours. The comments section was a war zone of racial slurs and death threats, but it was the face in the footage that made his stomach turn to ice. Bobby the Mountain Kowalski. Still 300 pounds, still breaking bones for money. The victim this time was a kid, Damon Rivers, 22, promising wide receiver for UNLV. The same age Tank had been when his own dreams got buried under lies and blood money. In the grainy cell phone footage, Bobby had the kid in a chokehold outside the Cascade Hills Country Club, the same exclusive white enclave where Tank had once worked security. Where everything went to hell in 1987, Tank's phone buzzed. Text from Maya, his daughter. The daughter who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years until this morning. "Dad, I know you see the news. That's my boyfriend, Damon, the guy getting choked. We need to talk." He read it twice before the words sank in. Maya was dating the kid in the video, the kid who'd been assaulted by the same psychopath who destroyed Tank's life 35 years ago. The same psychopath Tank had watched commit worse crimes and said nothing about. His reflection stared back from the black TV screen, a broken-down ex-heavyweight with gray stubble and eyes that had seen too much. The apartment around him was a monument to mediocrity: cheap furniture, unpaid bills on the coffee table, a single framed photo of Maya from her high school graduation, the only photo where she was still smiling at him. The Belmont Country Club incident had cost him everything: his boxing career, his reputation, his family. After that night, the Nevada Athletic Commission had found mysterious irregularities in his training records. His manager had dropped him. The offers had dried up. Within 6 months, Tank Washington had gone from rising heavyweight contender to casino security guard. He'd built a decent life from the ashes. His private security consulting business kept casino executives alive and paid the bills. But decent wasn't the same as whole. Decent didn't fill the hole where his dreams used to live. Now Bobby Kowalski was back, still playing enforcer for rich white men who wanted their problems handled quietly. Still destroying young black athletes who got too close to their precious sanctuaries. Tank opened his laptop and searched for everything he could find about the incident. The official story was clean and simple. Damon Rivers had been asked to leave the Cascade Hills Country Club after creating a disturbance at a charity golf tournament. Security had used appropriate force to escort him from the premises. No charges filed, case closed. But Tank recognized the sanitized language. He'd heard it before, after that night in 1987 when the truth got buried under a mountain of money and influence, when the real victim became the villain and the monsters walked away clean. His phone rang. Maya's number. "Dad?" Her voice was different. Scared, young, not the angry, distant tone she'd used for years. "Baby girl, I saw the video. They're saying Damon started it, that he was drunk, aggressive. But I was there, Dad. He wasn't drinking. He was invited. One of the boosters brought him. And that gorilla he came out of nowhere." Tank's jaw tightened. "Bobby Kowalski. You know him?" Tank stared at the photo on his coffee table, Maya in her cap and gown, before she'd learned what her father really was. Before she discovered that the man she'd idolized had spent his life running from the truth instead of fighting for it. "We have history. The lawyers are saying Damon should take a settlement. Keep quiet. But if he does that, this Bobby guy just gets away with it, And the next kid gets what Damon got, Tank finished. Or worse. Through the window, Las Vegas sprawled in neon chaos beneath the desert stars. Somewhere out there, Bobby Kowalski was sleeping peacefully in his bed, confident that money and power would protect him again, just like they had in 1987. But Tank wasn't the same broken man who'd walked away from that country club 35 years ago. He'd spent decades building himself into something harder, something that could survive in the shadows between the casinos and the corruption. And now his daughter, his only shot at redemption, was asking for his help. Maya, what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change how you see me, how you see everything. Dad, what are you talking about? Tank closed his eyes and let himself remember that night at the Belmont. The night that had haunted every dream for 35 years. The night he'd learned that sometimes the monsters wear badges, and sometimes the victims are the most dangerous predators of all. That night in 1987. What really happened? I'm finally ready to tell the truth. But as the words left his mouth, Tank realized he might not know what the truth actually was. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Tank could hear Maya's breathing through the phone, careful and controlled the way she'd breathed as a child when she was trying not to cry. Outside his apartment window, the distant hum of the Strip carried on the desert wind. Slot machines and dreams and desperation all grinding together in the Nevada night. Dad? Maya's voice was small. You're scaring me. Tank walked to the kitchen and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, his hands steadier now that the decision was made. The amber liquid caught the light from the Strip, casting golden reflections across the worn Formica counter. This was the same bottle he'd opened the night Maya graduated from law school, the night he'd called to congratulate her and she'd hung up after 30 seconds. The night he'd realized that some wounds never heal, they just learn to live in the shadows. I was 24, he began, settling into his worn leather chair, the one piece of furniture he'd kept from his fighting days. 2 fights away from a title shot. Had this crazy idea I was going to be the next Muhammad Ali. Through the phone, he heard Maya shift, probably curling up on that expensive couch in her Summerlin townhouse, the one she'd bought with her law firm salary, in the life she'd built deliberately distant from his world of broken noses and blood money. I know all this, Dad. You had 17 wins, 3 knockouts that year. 18, Tank corrected quietly. There was one more fight they never put on the books. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tank took a sip of bourbon and let the burn remind him why he'd stayed quiet for so long. Some stories were meant to stay buried. Some truths were more dangerous than lies. I took a security job at the Belmont Country Club to make ends between fights. Minimum wage, but easy money. Stand around in a cheap suit and make sure the rich folks felt safe from people who looked like me. He could picture that younger version of himself, all swagger and muscle, believing his fists could punch through any barrier the world put in front of him. The kid who thought racism was just another opponent you could knock out with the right combination. Bobby Kowalski ran security there. 300 pounds of mean, like God had taken a grizzly bear and taught it to hate. But he wasn't just muscle, he was connected. Had friends in the police, the athletic commission, the gaming control board, the kind of friends who could make problems disappear. Tank stood and walked to the window, watching the endless stream of headlights flow down Henderson Boulevard. Somewhere in those lights was Maya's life, her practice, her boyfriend, her future. Everything he'd fought to protect by keeping his mouth shut. There was this exhibition match, private thing, underground. Rich men betting on poor men beating each other bloody. Happens more than you'd think in this town. Dad, that's illegal. Baby, half my life's been illegal. That's not the point. Tank's reflection stared back from the window glass. Older, grayer, but with the same haunted eyes that had watched too much and done too little. The point is what I saw that night, what I thought I saw. Maya was quiet now, and Tank could feel the weight of her attention through the phone line. This was how she'd listened as a child when he'd tell her bedtime stories about brave knights and righteous battles. Back when she still believed her father was one of the good guys. There was a fighter there, young kid, maybe 21. Cocky as hell, flashy footwork reminded me of Sugar Ray Leonard. He was supposed to throw the fight in the 5th round, take a dive for the right money. Tank's free hand found the old photo on the side table. Maya at 8 years old, sitting on his shoulders after one of his victories, both of them grinning like they owned the world. Before she learned that the world wasn't something you could own, only something you could survive. But the kid got greedy, started winning too convincingly. The bets were going the wrong way, and some very dangerous people were about to lose serious money. The bourbon was working now, loosening the knots in his chest that had been tied tight for 35 years. Tank had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his head, but he'd never imagined having it with his daughter's boyfriend's blood on the line. Bobby came to me that night and said the kid needed to learn some respect. Said he was going to teach him a lesson about keeping promises to white folks. Maya's breathing had changed, shorter and more shallow. Tank knew that sound. It was how she breathed when she was preparing for a fight, the way she'd sounded before every mock trial in law school. "What did you do, Dad?" Tank closed his eyes and let himself fall back into that night, into the smell of cigar smoke and sweat, the sound of money changing hands and bones breaking, into the moment when everything went wrong. "I watched," he whispered. "God help me, Maya. I just watched." The words fell between them like stones into a well, and Tank waited for the splash of Maya's judgment. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the whisper of his own breathing. He was about to speak again when the sound came, not Maya's voice, but the sharp electronic chime of his apartment's doorbell. Tank's blood turned to ice. In 15 years of living in this complex, no one had ever used that doorbell. His few clients called ahead. Maya had never visited. The pizza guy used the knocker. Dad? What was that? Someone's at the door. Tank moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the parking lot below. A black sedan sat under the security light, engine running. Professional, expensive, the kind of car that meant either very good news or very bad trouble, and Tank had stopped expecting good news decades ago. The doorbell chimed again, longer this time. Insistent. "Don't answer it," Maya said, and there was something in her voice, lawyer instincts kicking in, maybe, or just the primal fear that came from growing up in Tank's world, where unexpected visitors usually brought pain. But Tank was already moving toward the door, muscle memory taking over. 35 years of casino security had taught him that running from trouble only made it chase you harder. Better to face it head on your own terms. Through the peephole, he saw a man in an expensive overcoat, maybe 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not construction sites. The face was familiar in that nagging way of half-remembered nightmares, but Tank couldn't place it. Marcus Washington? The voice was cultured, educated. "My name is Dr. Richard Belmont. I believe we need to talk." The name hit Tank like a right hook to the solar plexus. Belmont. As in Belmont Country Club. As in the place where everything had gone to hell in 1987. As in the family that owned half of Las Vegas's legitimate businesses and probably twice as much of the illegitimate ones. "Dad?" Maya's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Dad, what's happening?" Tank realized he'd dropped the phone. His hand was shaking as he bent to pick it up. 35 years of carefully constructed calm crumbling in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "I have something that belongs to you," Dr. Belmont continued through the door. "Something from that night. From Kenneth." Kenneth. Tank's knees nearly buckled. Kenneth was the fighter, the kid he'd watched Bobby Kowalski destroy in the basement of the Belmont Country Club. The kid whose screams had echoed in Tank's dreams for 3 decades. The kid whose beating had cost Tank everything when he'd tried to report it and found himself facing down corruption that ran deeper than the Nevada desert. "Who's Kenneth?" Maya's voice was sharp now, prosecutor sharp. "Dad, pick up the phone. Who is Kenneth?" Tank's finger hovered over the deadbolt. Everything logical in his brain screamed danger. After 35 years of silence, someone connected to that night showing up on his doorstep wasn't coincidence. It was threat, or trap, or both. But there was something else, too. A possibility that had haunted him longer than the nightmares, that maybe, somehow, Kenneth had survived. That maybe Tank's cowardice hadn't cost a life, just a beating. Maybe there was still time for redemption. "Mr. Washington, I know you're there, and I know you're afraid. But Kenneth wants to meet you. He's been waiting 35 years to tell you the truth about that night." The truth. Tank's hand clenched around the phone. He'd built his entire life around avoiding the truth, accepting the official story that Kenneth was a troublemaker who'd disappeared after causing problems at the club, taking the money they'd offered to keep quiet about what he'd witnessed. living with the shame of buying his silence with blood money. "Dad, don't open that door." Maya's voice was urgent now. "Something's wrong. Rich white men don't just show up at midnight to talk about the past, they bury the past." But Tank was already turning the lock, his hand moving with its own volition. Because Maya was wrong about one thing. The past didn't stay buried. It festered. It grew. And eventually it came looking for you. The door swung open, and Dr. Belmont smiled, the practiced expression of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He held up a manila envelope, yellowed with age. "Hello, Marcus. Kenneth asked me to give you this." His eyes were kind, grandfatherly, and Tank knew immediately that kindness was the most dangerous thing about him. "He says it's time you learned what really happened that night, and what you're going to do about it." Tank's world tilted on its axis. Nothing, not the beating, not the cover-up, not 35 years of guilt, had prepared him for this moment. Kenneth was alive. Tank's hand remained frozen on the doorframe, his body caught between the impulse to slam the door shut and the desperate need to know. Dr. Belmont stood patient as granite, that grandfatherly smile never wavering. The manila envelope held like a loaded gun between them. "Dad?" Maya's voice crackled through the phone's speaker, tinny and distant. "Dad, hang up and call 911. Now." But Tank couldn't move. Kenneth's name had unlocked something in his chest, 35 years of carefully buried grief and guilt spilling out like blood from a reopened wound. Behind Dr. Belmont, the black sedan's engine purred in the Nevada night, and Tank caught the silhouette of someone else in the passenger seat. Waiting. "You look surprised, Marcus." Dr. Belmont's voice carried the faint trace of an accent. Old money, East Coast boarding schools. "Did you really think Kenneth died that night?" Tank's voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I tried to find him. After. The hospitals, the morgues. He just vanished." "Oh, he didn't vanish. We relocated him. For his own protection, you understand. And yours." The older man glanced meaningfully at the phone in Tank's hand. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately? Family doesn't need to hear everything." Tank's jaw tightened. The suggestion felt like a threat, delicate and silk-wrapped but sharp enough to cut. "Maya, I'm going to call you back." "Dad, no. Don't you dare hang up this phone. 5 minutes, baby girl. I promise." Tank ended the call, knowing it was probably the stupidest thing he'd done in a life full of spectacularly stupid decisions. But some conversations could only happen in the space between two men who shared a secret. "May I come in?" Dr. Belmont asked, though he was already stepping forward. "What I have to show you? Well, let's just say the neighbors don't need to see it." Tank stepped aside, his body moving on autopilot while his mind raced. The apartment felt smaller with Dr. Belmont in it, like the walls had shrunk to accommodate all that barely contained power. The older man's eyes swept over the cheap furniture, the stack of unpaid bills, the single photo of Maya, cataloging Tank's life with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to assessing weaknesses. "Bourbon?" Tank gestured to the bottle on the counter, needing something to do with his hands. "I don't drink with men I'm about to destroy," Dr. Belmont said pleasantly, settling into Tank's chair like he owned it. "But please, help yourself. You'll need it." The words hit Tank like a physical blow. He poured 3 fingers anyway, his hands steady through decades of practice at functioning while terrified. "So this isn't a reunion then?" "Oh, it's exactly that. Just not the kind you were hoping for." Dr. Belmont opened the manila envelope and withdrew a stack of photographs, placing them face down on the coffee table. "Tell me, Marcus, in all these years, have you ever wondered why Bobby Kowalski let you walk away that night?" Tank's blood chilled. He'd wondered, of course. Had spent sleepless nights replaying those moments after Kenneth's beating, when he'd stood in that basement covered in another man's blood, expecting Bobby's fists to turn on him next. Instead, Bobby had just smiled and handed him an envelope full of cash. "You were supposed to fight Kenneth that night," Dr. Belmont continued. "Official bout, sanctioned by the Nevada Athletic Commission. Good purse for both fighters. But you called in sick that afternoon. Food poisoning, your manager said." Tank nodded slowly. He remembered that day, remembered Maya's mother begging him not to fight, convinced something bad would happen. He'd listened to her fears for once, called off the match. 24 hours later, she'd taken Maya and disappeared from his life forever. So we found a replacement. Local kid, eager for the money. Similar build, similar style. The kind of substitution that happens all the time in club fights. Dr. Belmont flipped over the first photograph. Tank's bourbon glass slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The photo showed two fighters in a ring, gloves up, dancing around each other. One was Kenneth, younger, cockier, but unmistakably the same man Tank had watched Bobby destroy. The other fighter was a stranger Tank had never seen before. That's not... Tank's voice failed him. Not you? No. Dr. Belmont flipped another photo. This young man's name was Jerome Patterson, 22 years old, trying to earn money for his mother's cancer treatments. He lasted 3 rounds before Bobby dragged him out of the ring and beat him to death in the basement. Tank's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, staring at the photos scattered across his coffee table. Different angles of the same terrible story. Jerome Patterson, not Kenneth, dying under Bobby Kowalski's fists, while Tank's name was written in the official bout records. You see the problem, don't you, Marcus? Dr. Belmont's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. For 35 years, you've been living with guilt over the wrong victim. Tank stared at the photographs until the images burned into his retinas. Jerome Patterson's young face, bloodied and broken, staring back from glossy paper like an accusation. The bourbon fumes rose from the shattered glass at his feet, filling the room with the sharp scent of his own cowardice. Jerome, he whispered, testing the name that should have haunted his dreams instead of Kenneth's. Jerome Patterson. His mother died 6 months later, Dr. Belmont continued, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of a surgeon describing an amputation. Cancer ate her alive while she waited for a son who would never come home. The treatments Jerome died trying to pay for? They might have saved her life. Tank's vision blurred. 2 deaths. A mother and son destroyed while he'd been carrying guilt for the wrong man, the wrong crime. The arithmetic of his failure was expanding, multiplying like cancer cells in his chest. But Kenneth Mackenzie is very much alive, Marcus. In fact, he's quite prosperous now. Has a beautiful house in Summerlin, not far from your daughter's place, coincidentally. Dr. Belmont smiled, and Tank finally understood why that expression felt so dangerous. It was the smile of a man holding all the cards in a rigged game. He owns 3 gyms, does quite well for himself training young fighters, teaches them how to make the right choices when the money gets complicated. The words settled into Tank's bones like lead poisoning. Kenneth was alive, successful, living 10 minutes from Maya while Tank had spent decades mourning a ghost. The shame of it was breathtaking. 35 years of self-imposed exile, of destroying his relationship with his daughter, of turning down fights and opportunities because he'd believed himself complicit in a murder that never happened. Why? Tank's voice was barely audible. Why are you telling me this now? Dr. Belmont gathered the photographs with practiced efficiency, sliding them back into the envelope like evidence being filed away. Because young Mr. Davis, your daughter's boyfriend, is making the same mistake Jerome Patterson made. He's forgotten that some fights aren't about winning and losing. They're about knowing your place. The room spun around Tank like he'd taken a hard shot to the temple. Brandon Davis, Maya's boyfriend. The athlete in the viral video, the one who'd been beaten at the same country club where Jerome died. Brandon's scheduled to fight next month. Exhibition match, very exclusive crowd. The kind of people who don't like being surprised by unexpected outcomes. Dr. Belmont stood, smoothing down his expensive overcoat. Kenneth thought you should know. Professional courtesy, fighter to fighter. Tank's mind raced through the implications like a computer calculating odds. Brandon was being set up the same way Jerome had been, a fix disguised as a fair fight, with violence waiting for anyone who didn't play along. And Maya, beautiful, brilliant Maya, had no idea her boyfriend was walking into a death trap. What do you want? Tank asked, though he already knew. Men like Dr. Belmont didn't make social calls or courtesy visits. They came when they needed something done, and they always collected their debts. Kenneth would like to meet with you. Tonight. He has a proposition that might benefit everyone involved. Dr. Belmont paused at the door, his hand resting on the knob like a threat. You see, Marcus, you've been carrying the wrong guilt for 35 years, but that doesn't mean you're innocent. Jerome Patterson died because you weren't there to fight Kenneth, because you chose your comfort over a young man's life. The truth hit Tank like a sledgehammer to the chest. He'd been so focused on the guilt of witnessing a murder that he'd never considered the guilt of absence. If he'd fought Kenneth that night as scheduled, Jerome Patterson would still be alive. The substitution that killed Jerome only happened because Tank had listened to fear instead of duty. Your cowardice has been killing people for decades, Dr. Belmont continued, his voice soft as velvet and sharp as broken glass. Jerome was just the first. How many other young fighters took beatings meant for you? How many other mothers buried sons because Marcus Washington was too afraid to show up? Tank's legs gave out completely. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he sat among the shards of broken glass, feeling each sharp edge through his clothes like tiny accusations. The weight of cascading failure pressed down on his chest. Jerome's death, his mother's suffering, Maya's lost childhood, Brandon's impending destruction. Kenneth will be waiting at the Belmont Country Club, Dr. Belmont said, opening the door to let in the desert night. Midnight. Come alone, and maybe we can prevent another Jerome Patterson situation. Maybe you can finally stop running from the damage you've caused. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Tank alone with the photographs scattered on his coffee table and the crushing realization that his 35 years of penance had been for the wrong sin. He'd been mourning a living man while a dead one rotted forgotten in the Nevada desert. His phone buzzed against the hardwood floor where he'd dropped it. Maya's name flashed on the screen, but Tank couldn't bring himself to answer. How could he tell her that her father wasn't just a coward? He was a killer who'd never even thrown the punch. Tank sat in the broken glass and bourbon, staring at Maya's name flashing on his phone screen. Each buzz felt like an electric shock, pulling him back from the abyss of his own guilt. He finally answered on the 7th ring. Dad? Jesus Christ, I've been calling... Maya. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. I need you to listen very carefully. Don't interrupt, don't argue, just listen. Silence on the other end. Maya knew that tone, the voice he'd used when she was 8 and had wandered too close to the casino parking garage where the loan sharks conducted business. Jerome Patterson, Tank said, the name feeling foreign on his tongue after 35 years. Look him up. Young fighter, died in 1987. I need to know everything, family, friends, where he trained. Dad, what the hell is going on? Who was that man? Tank closed his eyes, seeing Jerome's battered face in the photographs. 22 years old. Same age Maya had been when she'd graduated law school, when Tank had missed the ceremony because he couldn't bear to sit in a crowd of proud parents, knowing what he'd done. Just do it, baby girl. And one more thing. He paused, knowing the next words would change everything between them forever. I lied to you about why I stopped fighting, about why your mother left, about everything. The line went quiet for so long Tank thought she'd hung up. When Maya finally spoke, her voice carried the cold precision that made her dangerous in a courtroom. Are you in trouble? Tank laughed, a broken sound that echoed off his apartment walls. Trouble. Like calling a hurricane bad weather. Yeah, I'm in trouble. Then we fix it. That's what family does. The simple certainty in her voice nearly broke him. Family. After 35 years of self-imposed isolation, of birthday cards signed but never sent, of Christmas dinners eaten alone while watching Maya's life unfold through social media posts, she still called him family. This isn't fixable, Maya. Some things you can't lawyer your way out of. Try me. Tank pulled himself to his feet, glass crunching under his weight. Through the window, he could see the black sedan still idling in the parking lot, waiting. Kenneth Mackenzie was somewhere out there, alive and prosperous, training fighters while Jerome Patterson stayed dead. The arithmetic of injustice was staggering. Remember when you were little you asked me why I quit boxing? Tank moved to the window, keeping to the shadows. I told you I got old, lost my edge. I remember. Truth is, I was supposed to fight a man named Kenneth Mackenzie. Big money fight, biggest purse of my career. Would have set us up for life. Tank touched the glass, feeling the desert night's heat radiating through. Your mother begged me not to fight. Had one of her feelings. Said something bad would happen. So I called it off. Maya's breathing was audible through the phone. Sharp and controlled. Lawyer mode. Processing information. Building a case in her head. They found a substitute. Kid named Jerome Patterson needed money for his mother's cancer treatments. Tank's reflection stared back at him from the window. 58 years old, gray-haired, carrying the weight of another man's death. Jerome died in that ring, Maya. Beaten to death because I wasn't there to take what was meant for me. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. Tank waited for the click of disconnection, for Maya to finally understand that some sins were too large for forgiveness. Instead, she said, "Where's Kenneth now?" The question caught Tank off guard. Not why didn't you tell me, not how could you live with this, but where's Kenneth now? Maya's mind was already moving past the guilt to the tactical problem, the way it always did when she was building a case. Alive. Successful. He wants to meet tonight. Tank turned away from the window, unable to bear his own reflection anymore. About Brandon. Brandon? What does Brandon have to do with... Maya's voice cut off as the pieces fell into place. Oh God. They're setting him up, aren't they? The same way they set up Jerome. Tank nodded, though she couldn't see him. His brilliant daughter, connecting dots faster than he'd been able to in 35 years of brooding. Dr. Belmont said Brandon's fight next month isn't really a fight. It's a message. And if Brandon doesn't deliver that message, Tank let the implication hang in the air. Then he ends up like Jerome Patterson. Yeah. Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried steel, not the cold precision of a lawyer anymore, but the warm fury of a woman protecting what she loved. Dad? That man who came to your door tonight? Yeah? He made one mistake. Tank could hear Maya moving, the sound of drawers opening, papers rustling. He threatened my family. The words sent a chill down Tank's spine. Not fear, but something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Maya wasn't running. She was gearing up for war. Tank felt something shift inside his chest, a tectonic plate of guilt moving for the first time in 35 years. Maya's voice had carried the same steel he remembered from her childhood, when she'd faced down bullies twice her size with nothing but righteous fury and perfect diction. Maya, you don't understand what these people are capable of. I understand perfectly. The sound of papers shuffling grew more urgent. I've been researching the Belmont Country Club since that video went viral. Did you know they've had 17 accidental deaths on their property since 1985? 17, Dad. Drownings, heart attacks, slip and falls. All involving people who'd recently filed complaints or lawsuits against club members. Tank's blood turned to ice water. 17. He'd been carrying guilt over one death while an entire killing machine operated in plain sight, protected by money and influence and the silence of men like him. Jerome Patterson wasn't the first, he whispered. No, and Brandon won't be the last unless we stop this. Maya's voice carried across the phone line like a battle cry. I'm coming over. No. Tank moved away from the window, suddenly aware of how exposed he'd been standing there. It's not safe. They're watching. Then we meet somewhere else. I know a place. Maya paused, and Tank could hear her thinking, calculating angles the way she did when dismantling hostile witnesses. Dad? This Kenneth Mackenzie. You said he owns gyms now? 3 of them, according to Dr. Belmont. Training young fighters. Teaching them how to make the right choices when the money gets complicated. Maya's voice turned predatory. He's not just surviving, is he? He's recruiting. The pieces clicked together in Tank's mind like rounds sliding into a chamber. Kenneth wasn't just another victim who'd escaped. He was part of the machine now, feeding fresh meat to the grinder. How many young fighters had he steered toward fixed fights? How many Jerome Pattersons had he helped create? Maya, listen to me very carefully. Go to Brandon right now. Tell him you're taking a vacation somewhere far away. Don't pack, don't plan, just go. I'm not running. This isn't about running, it's about surviving long enough to fight back. Tank paced to his kitchen, keeping his voice low. The sedan was still out there, its occupants patient as cancer. These people don't just kill, baby girl, they destroy. They take everything you've ever cared about and turn it into a weapon against you, the way they did to you." The words hit him like a physical blow. Tank leaned against the counter, suddenly understanding the true scope of his punishment. They hadn't just covered up Jerome's death, they'd weaponized Tank's guilt, turned him into a walking ghost story. 35 years of isolation, of pushing away everyone he loved, of refusing opportunities that might have led him back to the ring. They'd made him complicit in his own destruction. "Yeah," he admitted, "the way they did to me. Then it's time to stop letting them win." Maya's voice softened, carrying an echo of the 8-year-old girl who used to patch up his cuts after training sessions. "Dad, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't go to that meeting alone." Tank looked at the manila envelope Dr. Belmont had left behind. Jerome Patterson's death photos spilling across his coffee table like tarot cards predicting a violent future. Kenneth Mackenzie was waiting at the Belmont Country Club, probably sitting in the same basement where Jerome had died, where 17 other accidents had been planned and executed. "I have to. It's the only way to protect you and Brandon." "No, it's the only way to get yourself killed." Maya's typing grew more frantic. "I'm sending you an address. Meet me there in an hour." "And Dad?" "Yeah? Bring whatever weapons you've got." Tank almost smiled despite everything. His daughter, the Harvard-educated lawyer, casually discussing firearms like she was planning a corporate merger. He wondered if Maya had always carried this capacity for violence, or if loving a man in danger had awakened something primal in her DNA. "Maya, I need you to understand something. After tonight, there's no going back. If we do this, if we fight them, they'll come for everyone we've ever cared about. Your career, your future, everything you've built. Everything I've built is meaningless if the people I love are dead." Maya's voice cracked slightly, showing the frightened daughter beneath the warrior's mask. "Dad, I just got you back. I'm not losing you again to some 30-year-old guilt trip." Tank closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Jerome Patterson's death finally beginning to shift. Not disappearing, it would never disappear, but moving from his shoulders to his hands, becoming something he could use instead of something that used him. "1 hour," he said. 1 hour. "And Dad?" "Yeah, baby girl? We're going to end this." The line went dead, leaving Tank alone with his ghosts and the terrible, beautiful prospect of finally fighting back. Tank moved through his apartment with the methodical precision of a man preparing for war. From the bedroom closet, he retrieved the .357 Magnum he'd bought after Maya's high school graduation, insurance against the kind of trouble that followed old fighters like shadows. From the kitchen drawer, a tactical knife his Marine buddy had given him years ago. From under the bathroom sink, the brass knuckles he'd confiscated from a casino patron in 1998 and never returned to security. The weapons felt foreign in his hands after decades of peace, but muscle memory was a cruel teacher. His fingers found the proper grip, the correct balance, the sweet spot where metal became extension of bone. The address Maya had sent led to an abandoned warehouse in North Las Vegas, the kind of place where legitimate businesses went to die. Tank arrived first, circling the building twice before parking in the shadows between 2 rusted shipping containers. The black sedan had followed him partway, then peeled off, either confident in their surveillance or setting a trap of their own. Maya's BMW pulled up 20 minutes later, headlights cutting through the desert darkness like accusations. She stepped out wearing all black, jeans, jacket, boots that could run or kick depending on necessity. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that made her look like the prosecutor who'd sent 3 mob lawyers to federal prison. "You came armed," Tank observed, noting the slight bulge under her jacket. "Glock 19. Brandon taught me." Maya's smile was sharp as broken glass. Turns out dating an athlete has unexpected benefits. They embraced awkwardly. Father and daughter reunited over shared violence. Tank could feel her trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline, the same electric current that used to flow through him before big fights. "Where is he?" Tank asked. "Safe house. 3 of his teammates are with him, all armed." Maya pulled out her phone, showing Tank a location pin. "He wanted to come, but I told him this was family business." Family business. The words carried weight between them, 35 years of absence compressed into 2 syllables. Tank had missed her first steps, first day of school, graduation, law school, every moment that mattered. But he was here now, and that had to count for something. Maya, about Jerome Patterson. I found him. She pulled out a tablet, fingers dancing across the screen. Jerome Marcus Patterson, born December 1964, died March 1987. Buried in Palm Cemetery under a headstone his mother couldn't afford. Maya's voice cracked slightly. She died 6 months later. Cervical cancer, no treatment. Tank felt the weight of 2 deaths settle on his shoulders like lead blankets. Mother and son, destroyed while he'd been running from ghosts. But here's what's interesting, Maya continued, swiping to a new screen. Jerome wasn't just some desperate kid. He was 23-2 as a professional, ranked 4th in his division. Rising star, legitimate prospects. Someone paid him a lot of money to take that fight. Dr. Belmont said he needed money for his mother's treatment. That's what they wanted people to think. Maya showed him a bank record, numbers glowing green in the warehouse darkness. Jerome deposited $50,000 2 weeks before the fight. In 1987 money. That wasn't desperation. That was enough to buy silence. Tank's mind raced through the implications. Jerome hadn't been a victim stumbling into a trap. He'd been a willing participant who got betrayed. The same way they were trying to use Brandon now. Kenneth's not just recruiting fighters, Tank realized. He's recruiting conspirators, making them complicit before he destroys them. Maya nodded grimly. I pulled the records on Kenneth's gyms. Every year, 2 or 3 of his promising fighters take sudden career detours, mysterious injuries, failed drug tests, family emergencies that force early retirement. The ones who don't play along have accidents. The pattern was elegant in its cruelty. Recruit young talent, offer them dirty money, then eliminate them when they became inconvenient. Kenneth had turned boxing into an assembly line of broken dreams. There's more, Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The Belmont Country Club isn't just a front. It's a recruiting center. They identify athletes with financial problems, family issues, anything that makes them vulnerable. Then they make offers that seem too good to refuse. Tank thought about Brandon, young and successful but still carrying student loans, still trying to prove himself worthy of Maya's love, the perfect target for men who specialized in exploiting hope. They offered him something, Tank said. It wasn't a question. Last month, exhibition fight, guaranteed win, enough money to buy a house. Maya's eyes blazed with fury. He turned them down because he didn't want to embarrass his opponents, because he's a good man who believes in fair play. And now they're going to kill him for it. Not if we kill them first. The words hung between them like a bridge burned deliberately. Maya had crossed a line tonight, moving from defender to aggressor, from lawyer to warrior. Tank recognized the transformation because he'd made the same journey decades ago, when boxing stopped being sport and became survival. Maya, no, Dad. They've been hunting our family for 35 years. Tonight, we hunt them back. Tank stared at his daughter, seeing himself reflected in her eyes, the same fury that had carried him through 43 professional fights now burning in Maya's face. But where his anger had curdled into decades of self-destruction, hers remained pure, focused, surgical. We do this smart, he said finally. Like you planned those mob prosecutions. Evidence first, violence second. Maya smiled, and Tank glimpsed the 8-year-old girl who used to strategize her way out of playground disputes with elaborate negotiations. Already done. I've been building a federal case against the Belmont Club for 3 months. Securities fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. The only thing I was missing was a witness to the Patterson fight. You have one now. I have better than that. Maya swiped her tablet again, revealing surveillance photos, bank records, recorded phone conversations. I have enough evidence to put Kenneth Mackenzie and his entire network away for life. The FBI has been waiting for someone to break the silence. Tank felt something shift in his chest. Not the familiar weight of guilt, but its opposite. Relief. For 35 years, he'd carried Jerome Patterson's death like a tumor, growing heavier with each passing year. Now, suddenly, that weight was transforming into something useful. Ammunition. When? He asked. Tomorrow morning. Federal agents will simultaneously raid the Belmont Club, Kenneth's 3 gyms, and 17 properties connected to the money laundering operation. Maya's eyes glittered in the warehouse darkness. By sunset tomorrow, the whole network falls apart. Tank nodded, understanding filling him like sunrise. This was why Maya had become a lawyer, not just to argue cases, but to demolish systems of injustice with the same methodical precision she'd inherited from him. Where he'd used his fists to solve problems, she'd learned to use the law itself as a weapon. What about tonight? Kenneth's expecting me at the club. You're going to meet him, but you won't be alone. Maya pulled out a small recording device, no bigger than a button. Wear this. Get him talking about Jerome, about Brandon, about the whole operation. Give the FBI everything they need to ensure these convictions stick. Tank clipped the device to his shirt, feeling its weight like a medal of honor. After 35 years of running from the truth, he was finally going to speak it aloud, in Kenneth Mackenzie's face, while federal agents listened to every word. They drove to the Belmont Country Club in separate cars, Maya hanging back while Tank approached the main entrance. The building looked different at night. Less like a gentleman's club, more like a mausoleum. Appropriate, considering how many dreams had died within its walls. Kenneth was waiting in the same basement where Jerome Patterson had been murdered, sitting behind an antique desk like some perverted version of a corporate executive. He'd aged well. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of tan that came from owning multiple homes in warm climates. Marcus Washington. Kenneth smiled, rising to shake hands. You look good for a man carrying 35 years of guilt. Tank accepted the handshake, feeling the recording device pulse against his chest like a second heartbeat. You look good for a man who beats kids to death for money. Kenneth's smile never wavered. Jerome Patterson knew exactly what he was getting into. Same as Brandon Chen knows now. These boys make their choices, Marcus. We just provide the opportunities. Is that what you call murder now? Opportunity? I call it evolution. The weak get culled. The strong survive to serve a higher purpose. Kenneth poured himself a scotch from a crystal decanter, the same calm confidence Tank remembered from their supposed fight night. You could have been part of this, you know. Instead, you chose to hide for 3 decades like a guilty child. Tank felt his old rage stirring, the familiar heat that had powered 1,000 training sessions. But this time, instead of swallowing the anger, he fed it to the recording device, let it sharpen his words into surgical instruments. Tell me about the others, he said. 17 deaths, Maya found. How many more? Kenneth's eyes flashed with something like pride. Your daughter is impressive. Harvard Law, federal prosecution experience, dating a clean athlete who could be useful if properly motivated. She'd make an excellent addition to our organization. The threat was delivered casually, but Tank heard the promise of violence underneath. They weren't just planning to destroy Brandon. They wanted to corrupt Maya, turn her into another weapon in their arsenal. Tank smiled, finally understanding why he'd survived 35 years of guilt. Not as punishment, but as preparation. Everything, Jerome's death, Maya's distance, his own exile, had been leading to this moment. Kenneth, Tank said softly, you just made a mistake. Before Kenneth could respond, FBI agents poured through every entrance, shouting commands, weapons drawn. Maya appeared beside Tank, badge glittering on her jacket lapel. Special Prosecutor Maya Washington, she announced. Kenneth Mackenzie, you're under arrest. Tank watched his daughter read rights to the man who'd haunted his dreams and felt peace settle over him like a warm blanket. Jerome Patterson was still dead, would always be dead, but his death had finally found its purpose. Justice. At last.